Well, good morning. No matter where you're from, I know it's great to be at Fort Lauderdale here in February. Even in my new home in Alabama, it's a little chilly this time of year. General Sullivan, thank you for that very kind introduction. Sir, you've known me for such a long time. I also want to thank you for the things you could have said about me but didn't. I also want to thank you for your leadership of AUSA and our Army. The Army we took to war this last decade was the greatest ever, and in many respects because of the foundation you laid for us. So let's have a great round of applause for General Sullivan. I also want to add my welcome to many of our distinguished guests. Congressman West, it's great to have you here airborne, and all the elected leaders and their representatives. I want to welcome my colleague, General and Mrs. Cohn, for also helping with this conference, for all you do at TRADOC, and all you do for our Army. And to many of our retired four-star generals, thank you for staying engaged and thank you for making a difference. To all our leaders, Army, DOD, industry, and AUSA, thank you for what you do every day for our Army. We can't say that enough. And I also want to add my congrats and thanks to that color guard. Weren't they spectacular? This forum always provides such a great opportunity for us to get together and talk about the future and talk about our shared interest. But this year is even more important because this is such a critical time for our Army. In my 37 years of service, I can't remember one time when I've seen so much change in such a short time. Breathtaking. And not only did we witness a number of significant events, but as you saw at the end of the video, we've also received a lot of guidance from every level of leadership. As you remember, when 2011 came to a close, we all had a lot of questions. There was a lot of uncertainty about the budget, about the way ahead for the Army and DOD. Because we all knew we were going to face the same historic budget reductions we've seen at the end of every conflict. But in just the last 2.5 months, we've gotten answers to some of those questions. We have a new DOD strategy. Many of you probably saw the President, the SecDef, the Chairman, the Joint Chiefs, all standing together in the Pentagon when it was released. It was not only a powerful image, it was more importantly, it reflected a unified message. And only 3 weeks later, the Secretary of Defense released his new budget priorities, where he outlined the difficult choices the services had made. And did you notice the order they came in? Strategy came first, The budget came second. How many times have we seen the budget released before the strategy? And shortly after that, our chairman, General Dempsey, released the strategic direction to the Joint Force. It talks about the need to balance our ends, our ways, our means. And it speaks to the logic behind the tough choices we're making. And I'm going to talk about some of those tough choices in a minute. And just last Friday, we released the new Army Posture Statement for 2012. And one of the things it highlights is the absolute requirement for institutional adaptation, including logistics and acquisition. And just a couple of weeks ago, our Chief of Staff, General Ordiano, issued his own marching orders to our Army. And you can see the reoccurring themes in these strategic documents, like the need to be bold, adaptive, and innovative. And at AMC, we published our own strategic plan, fully aligned with the guidance that you see here, because we want AMC to be every bit as agile, flexible, as the operating forces that we support. And this week, we have some terrific panels, led by our leaders who are on the cutting edge. Lieutenant General Vai, who spent the lion's share of his time as my deputy in Kuwait, facilitating the retrograde out of Iraq. There is nothing left. There are no iron mountains, no containers, no vehicles. It's gone. And people can't believe it. And General Vai will lead that reset and retrograde panel. And Major General Pat McQuistion, the commander of Army Sustainment Command, our executing arm for change. She'll lead the discussion on institutional adaptation. So don't miss them and the other panels that we have scheduled this week. The bottom line is, I can't remember a time when we've seen so many strategic documents in such a short time and in the right order. Of course, there are plenty of questions still to be answered and plenty of tough decisions ahead of us. But this week gives us the opportunity to talk about this new strategy and the new environment we're operating in. Now, while the new DoD strategy identifies our critical missions, where we need to invest, and where we need to accept risk, we can't ignore the inconvenient truths like these. These threats, either singularly or collectively, can undermine our national security or directly threaten our way of life. So we can't ignore them, just because it's more convenient or less expensive to think they don't exist. So we must invest correctly, and we must organize effectively. The other big inconvenient truth is the budget challenge. And many of you have seen this slide before. Spending at the height of every conflict with dramatic reductions afterwards each and every time. Some folks look at this and say, don't worry, we can do this, we've been there before. But I'm reminded of a quote of our former DepSecDef, Secretary Lynn. He said, we've gone 0 for 4 in managing drawdowns, and we can't afford to go 0 for 5. We've all seen the second and third order effects of not getting it right. Task Force Smith before Korea, the Hollow Army after Vietnam, and we can't let that happen again. And one of the positive things we're seeing is a tremendous amount of intellectual energy invested to ensure that the new strategy and the new budget priorities help us get it right. General Dempsey put it in simplest terms. He talked about getting after ends, ways, and means. Well, we all know, and I would say we even expected, our means would go down. It was inevitable. But our ends really haven't changed. We will still be counted on to respond to full spectrum operations and win. A dip in the budget is not going to give anyone a pass on what our nation expects us to do. So when the means don't meet your ends, you've got one choice left. That's to get after the ways. We have fundamentally got to change the way we do business. So we must find ways to adapt. And institutional adaptation is not just a budget drill. Yes, it is about becoming more efficient, but it's also about becoming more effective. One of the many pieces of advice General Sullivan gave me, and I found particularly useful over the years, was to try to capture your vision all on one slide. So, sir, here it is, AMC 2020 on one slide. Our goal, to be a globally logistics network command. We're aligned with the Secretary and the Chief's priorities. In the middle, AMC is represented by the bullet train with a focus on the warfighter on our path to 2020. We're propelled by our strategic plan, which is our 4 competencies and our 5 lines of effort. The 5 lines of effort and our 4 core competencies will serve kind of as the rheostat and the barometer of the health of AMC and the health of our Army. And when we see we can't do these things, fundamentally reset, equip, or sustain our soldiers, it's like the canary in the mine shaft. And we'll use that as our rheostat and barometer for the health of our Army. Our journey is built on a foundation of trust with all of our stakeholders, including industry. Here are our must-dos that we must accomplish in order to get to AMC 2020. There are our challenges, and there are opportunities. But our goal is for AMC to keep pace with the operational Army as we move to 2020. So now I want to give you a peek inside of our AMC investment portfolio. We're no different than anyone else. We can no longer afford to do the things the way we've been doing them for the last 10 years. We have to account for the threat and the budget realities, so we too have to adapt ways to meet ends. As you would expect, some of our investments will go up, as represented by the 5 green arrows. Some areas will need to adapt and realign, as represented by the yellow arrows. And some investments will be reduced or divested as appropriate. So let me take a moment to walk you around our portfolio, starting off with an area of growth, foreign military sales. As you can see, we had a 400% growth in foreign military sales from 2003 to 2011. In fact, already this year, we hit $14 billion, which exceeds our total FMS sale for FY11. As we get smaller, building partner capacity, interoperability will be even more important. This is a win-win-win. Win for us as we get rid of legacy equipment, win for our coalition partners because they get more capacity at less cost, and win for our industry partners and our depots as we restore equipment to like new. The next growth industry I'd like to talk about is the way we're going to manage material, which is tied to our vision. Last year, the Secretary of the Army designated Army Material Command as the lead material integrator for our Army. This has and will continue to change the way we manage and distribute equipment. In the past, we had multiple piles, we had multiple managers, we had multiple sources of repair, and we had multiple information systems. We now have a single material integrator, AMC, with global visibility of all Army equipment. It's kind of like an AMC.com with logistics Google and logistics Amazon capabilities. We became fully operationally capable on 15 February, and we're already seeing the results and savings from these efficiencies. LMI will fundamentally inform us on what we buy and what we repair in the future. Now I want to talk about a couple areas where we need to adapt and realign. Those marked with the yellow arrows. We need to retain some of the capabilities that we've built over the recent years, but we have to figure out how to do them more efficiently and more effectively. And the first one I want to talk about is the way we contract services. Some of you may have heard about the Enhanced Army Global Logistics Enterprise, or EAGLE. It's fundamentally going to change our approach and how we contract services for our Army. It's going to help us standardize installation contracts across maintenance, supply, and transportation services. And we've already seen the benefits of this approach in installation services alone, where we've gone from 600 contracts down to 352 just by consolidating and optimizing our contracts. Eagle will also create additional opportunities for our small business. Right now, we do about $90 million with small business, and we expect that to be over $230 million of business with our small business partners. Another area we need to adapt and realign our capabilities is in research and development. Obviously, the face of warfare has changed and continues to change. Our armies are more lethal, our soldiers are more capable, and more survivable. And R&D has been hugely responsible for the evolution of this change. If we just compare the casualties from World War II to today, knowing full well that one is too many, tactics, technique, procedures are all at play, but we know advances in R&D played a key role. And we also know that our soldiers must always know they have the best equipment our nation can provide. And we can't forget we have a very adaptive enemy. And as good as our technology is, you know the enemy is working to counter its effectiveness even as we sit here today. So we must keep our R&D efforts on the leading edge. But we also have to have an affordable strategy. So we have to streamline our R&D efforts, focus on high priorities, be able to accelerate breakthrough technologies that protect our soldiers, make us more lethal, and lighten the load. Now I'd like to talk about some of those areas where we anticipate we'll be reducing our investment, in some cases divesting, those with the red arrows. Let's take a look at munitions. Obviously, this capability is not going away, but as you can see by the number, our investment is going down. We are out of Iraq, and as we come out of Afghanistan, the requirements will continue to go down. Even as we reduce the production of legacy munitions, we'll continue to invest in munitions that support a new threat, a smaller army. And at the same time, we have to protect our industrial base by modernizing our World War II era facilities while securing our ability to surge. Now, an area where we're trying to work ourselves out of a job is Chem D-Mill. And Chem D-Mill is actually a great news story. We are 5 years ahead of schedule with a cost avoidance of over $4 billion. In 2003, we had 9 chemical sites. In 2012, we're down to 2 with the recent closure of Umatilla. What's most notable about this is that they did it while maintaining an incredible safety record. In fact, our safety stats show that it's actually safer to work in an AMC Chem D-Mill facility than it is in a bank. I guess you can always get your hand stuck in the teller or something. While I don't have time to cover our entire portfolio, I'll be glad to address any of those throughout the week. I did want to show you what we're trying to do to adapt to the new fiscal realities and the new emerging operating environment. These are tough choices, and I know you're all working hard to adapt your organizations to the new environment as well. The reality is, over the last 10 years, we've become unaffordable. We needed stuff fast, we needed lots of it, and we needed good quality. And that was the right approach at the time, but that's a very expensive strategy. So the truth is, we all have to make tough choices. Because we can always pretend that the new operating environment somehow doesn't apply to us, or deny that it will affect our particular program or mission. Or we can be parochial and keep our interests ahead of what's best for the Army and our nation. In the Army, we often do that by padding our budgets, knowing that we're going to take cuts. And I say in industry, how many of your companies factor in the cost of protests as part of your business practice? At AMC, we had 262 protests last year and only 1 sustained. This kind of circling the wagons around our service or around a particular program adds costs and delays of getting the right kind of support to our warfighters. We can also choose the old salami slicing strategy, cutting budgets by 5, 10, 15% across the board. Everybody's budget, everybody's program gets cut regardless of where it falls on the priority list. This is the easy way out. We don't have to prioritize our capabilities, we don't have to articulate risk, and we don't have to make tough decisions. We could also do what comes so naturally to us, which is prepare for the last war. Staying inside our comfort zone, staying with what worked in the past, even though we know the threat will change and the next war will be different. These are the kind of decisions and choices we can no longer afford to make. And most of them are proven losing strategies. I hope I've convinced you that we're trying to do the right thing for the right reason. That we're not only going to make the tough choice, but the right choice. For our nation, for our Army, for our soldiers, and for their families, no matter what the funding levels are. So I guess the question is, can we all be winners? I think we can. Is there a way to avoid the unintended consequences we've seen in the past? I think there is. If ever there was a time to figure out how we're going to get after these challenges, it's now. So let's get after it. Let's all make the right choices. Thank you. It's great being with you. I look forward to the dialogue and to your questions. Army strong. Please expand on what lead material integration for the Army. Please expand what it means, how it was changing material management. In the past, if I asked you who was responsible for managing or equipping the Army, would you say the G8, the G4, FORSCOM, the PMs, AMC? And the answer would have been yes, 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 yes. So we had to divided our equipment in the Army to different areas of responsibility. And now with the designation of AMC as the lead material integrator, we are responsible, a single point of entry for the Army on distributing and managing our equipment. So this gives the customer, the warfighters, the units, a single point of entry when they're trying to get equipment. And now we're linked with Forces Command, their R4Gen Army Forces Generation Model. We get the demand signal from Forces Command. We can now see all the piles, whether it was APS or PDT, and we had lots of piles, left behind equipment, THEAR provided equipment, THEAR sustainment socks. We had piles, although we had multiple information systems, so we couldn't see into one system where everything was. It was very inefficient. We made it work. This system, with one system, with the logistics information warehouse, one authoritative database, and one integrator, will be able to manage and distribute based on department priorities and strategy. If I didn't finish that, if there's more questions, I'll be glad to talk about it. Your indicator charts mentioned arsenals, depots would be a divesting stock. If you can pull that slide up. What we see in our capacity in our arsenals, depots, we have a workload capability and capacity 3 times of Vietnam. And now we're seeing those workloads come down. And so what we're trying to do is balance the workload through our depots, arsenals, and industry to create centers of excellence for repairs of certain types of equipment. But we know this is coming down, and this is something we have to keep our eye on because we need to keep an organic industrial base that allows us to surge and not be flat-footed in the future. So this one, as we're looking at it, the workload's coming down, our responsibility to try to right-size and balance our workload across the industrial base so that we maintain a surge capability and an organic capability critical to our future. Please expand on the increasing role of civilians in leadership in AMC at a time when the Hill is critical of government civilians. Well, first let me say for AMC, we have the most talented civilians that I've ever worked with in my entire career. Of AMC, of our about 70,000 person workforce, only 3% are military. Only 3%. The rest are civilians. And they work around the globe. They deploy. They do the heavy lifting. And so I'm very comfortable with our civilian workforce, the talent that we have, the continuity that we have, the vision that we have. If you asked me probably 10 years ago what SESs do and you put adjectives, they would tell you the same: continuity, stability. But now they are on the leading edge of transformation, adaptation, and innovation. So I think we are right-sizing our organization just like everybody else, and we're trying to match capabilities with capacity, and we're keeping that in line with TRADOC's Army 2020 so that we have the right capability in the right place at the same time. We don't want to wake up and Army 2020 looks like this and we still look like an institutional organization that hasn't adapted. So keeping those transformations linked will be critical. Please expand on expanding opportunities for small business. Where can one learn more about this? We're going to have a panel that's going to talk about the Eagle contract. You can also go downstairs to our display where we have a great video and some subject matter experts to talk about that contract. The way this contract is designed is to allow all levels of industry to compete, and our analysis shows there will be greater opportunities under the single contract than we've had under multiple contracts in the past. And that was my last question. Oh, some more coming. They're still coming. Not my last question. Okay. What is the plan for the disposition of the thousands of MRAP family vehicles that have been and will be retrograded out of OIF? I think the Army Department is still working on our overall strategy. We're looking at multiple things at the same time. What our future Army looks like and what's the role of the MRAP. What does our APS, what is it going to look like in supporting a CONUS-based Army? So I think we're still sorting that out. Specifically on what kinds. We have multiple variants. Which one will be suitable for Army 2020? We have an opportunity with foreign military sales, so I think we haven't refined that because we're still kind of in transformation to decide what our brigade's going to look like, what the composition of what Army 2020s looks like. Don't donate first. Thanks for all you've done. Second, could you briefly discuss the decreases in Depo Operations on your AMC economic workload focus and initiatives? I think I just tried to answer that one. Again, as we look in our portfolio and we're managing funds, we're managing our ability to reset, we're looking at the workload and the hours as we've retrograded out of Iraq. We still have a lot of equipment coming out of Afghanistan, so this is not something that's going to drop off the cliff. We got about $47 billion, I think was the last count of equipment in Afghanistan. 47 billion. That stuff's still coming out, and we'll still be retrograding. We'll still have to reset. Again, we want to reset and we want to buy to 2020. We don't want to reset stuff that's not going to be required in 2020 because we have focused, more limited funding that we didn't have with supplementals. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for all you do, and I'm looking forward to the week. Thank you.